Hello everybody, welcome back to You Can't Win. This is episode 18. Tom here with Donald as usual, and we are also joined today by AgileTablet. She's back.
Hey.
And we're going to be talking today about making friends online and what our experiences with that kind of thing have been like. Maybe some interesting stories here and there. So the three of us have all been friends online and also met in person. AgileTablet and I have, gone further than just meeting in person, and we've moved in together and are in a serious relationship. So that's something I suppose we can get into. So this has been spurred. The topic of this episode was sort of started by a question someone submitted when they were saying that they were a little bit unsure about how to approach people online to make friends, and they felt that we had seemed to meet and know a lot of people that had interesting interests. They were interesting people, and they were just wondering how we did that. So what do you guys think? Do you have any ideas about your strategies for making friends and influencing people on the internet?
Yeah, you're making it sound like there's more premeditation than I think it actually requires.
You got to neg them, all that stuff.
I think most of the time, for me anyway, and this is true on Twitter and it's also true on other platforms that I've been part of, it's banter really that starts it off. You just find people who are making the kind of jokes that make you laugh and are entertaining and can kind of sustain a volley of back and forth. And then, that's really the foundation of it. Because like on Twitter, for example, you don't even have to, you can just be like timeline buddies, You don't have to be getting really personal and deep in the DMs with people. You can just banter together on the timeline, and I would consider those people who I regularly do that with my pals. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess what happens there when you sort of do that is you build rapport with someone, and you're kind of just feeling out chemistry. So it's sort of like you're not trying to do anything. You're just like, oh, okay, I thought of something fun to say here, and then they throw something back, and then it goes
and
back
just
and
seeing
forth.
where it goes.
Yeah, and if you're sort of online at the same time, then it ends up becoming routine to some extent, and then that's, I guess, how friendships form, like in real life too. If you're at a workplace or something, you see someone all the time, and maybe you don't have any reason to talk to them, but you're just sitting next to each other, and you notice like something, you point it out to them, make a joke, and then things go from there.
Yeah, I guess for me, I had more of kind of a, I don't know, strange kind of process of this. Is that for years I kind of saw it online almost as like, I don't know, almost like a Big Other kind of Lacanian kind of thing. Like it was just this kind of thing that generated things that I could be interested in, and everyone kind of merged into like one kind of just giant internet person kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like I didn't really. It wasn't really until I started talking to like Tom and a few other people more regularly on chat and kind of things like that I started seeing it more as kind of like individual kind of personalities with all different backstories and all that kind of stuff. For a long time I would just kind of see it as a place where I could dump ideas and kind of annoy people and kind of what I mean? Like I don't know. And,
just like illicit responses.
Yeah, and it wasn't as if there was even people on the other end. Usually, it was kind of just some sort of generated thing that just kind of there was almost like spontaneous generation of all these opinions out there that I could then react to, kind of thing. So, and I still have a hard time keeping track of people online. Like I don't know, like it just. I can only remember like a few things about each person kind of a lot of the time, like of like there's like this kind of like penumbra of like like thousands of people out there that you are like kind of know who they are, but you couldn't pin down much more about them than just a few facts or something kind of thing.
Yeah, that's true.
And then I find it really hard to keep track. And I tend not to initiate conversations still. Like I still tend to be very passive about that kind of stuff. Like I get added to a few chats here and there, but then I've never really, like I've never started a chat really, or I've never like sought out a lot of that kind of stuff. Like, and I don't really reply much to people on their timeline other than like a few people kind of thing. Like, so I don't know. Maybe I'm not like the best person to give advice about that kind of stuff, but I do think that.
No, that I mean, we all have different approaches to things because, like, for example, I feel like I don't really have a lot of intelligence or original thought. So for me, the responding to people on the timeline is like that's what I have to offer. Like I'm not the one who's like generating takes. You know what I mean?
Okay.
But I can have a conversation. That's something I can do. I can joke around with people, but I'm not really like the generator of, I'm not the engine behind things. And I was trying to, as you were speaking about like your shift in how you approach things before versus now, I was trying to think of what changed for me too, because I think it was, I'm not going to say it was the inverse because I don't think that works, but I think that I used to be just a lurker. I really didn't like post. At least, I mean, I guess I did a little bit, but not to the degree where you're like building a persona and like, oh, that's that person. I really didn't do that at all. And I was acquainted with other people's personas. Like this is going back as far as like the late 90s.
Yeah.
There were certain people whose posts I always would be entertained by, and I would always seek them out, and that was like my regular rotation at the time. But I was not one of those. I did not like to chime in for many years, and I think possibly the thing that changed that is the ending of Web 1.0 to like a more feed-based thing. I'm not really sure how that worked or if it's just the timing of it happened to be that, but yeah, I started like actually interacting with people at a certain point. Whereas it used to be like the internet was for like my consumption. You know what I mean?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. I think it's very similar kind of thinking too, really, in some ways. It's just that I also had that kind of urge to also shoot something off once in a while to interfere with what was going on the timeline, maybe. Do you know what I mean? Like it wasn't like it was the same kind of thinking, but it was more kind of like I could bother people too. I don't know. Like so, but I was thinking about that. I think a lot of that kind of some of it tends to be, I don't know, I experience it quite differently than other people do because sometimes people say they remember this post or that post that I made or something like that. But I always say like, there was like times when, especially like, the Web 1.0 kind of stuff, like I wouldn't post for, sometimes I wouldn't have an account on SA for 3 or 4 months at a time. And and I was thinking like comparing that to now, where if you're not on Twitter for 3 months or something like that, it would be like you died or something like that kind of thing to people. It would be very strange compared to, and I didn't have like the urge. It wasn't like I was like okay, I'm gonna not do this. I didn't do it. I didn't, it didn't compute for like I don't know. And then I do need to get better at, like, I'm okay with the, Tom and I are pretty good at, we chat back and forth all the time, and this has kind of helped too, obviously, like having the podcast and stuff is kind of gives structure to some of that. But I'm not good at like following up with people about, just keep checking in on how they are and all that kind of stuff. Like just people that are a bit outside of my kind of like core group of online friends kind of thing. Like I don't really check in as much, and I should be doing that because I think that's healthy to have that kind of, sort of see how people are doing and kind of.
It's like good checking in on your neighbors.
Yeah, I'm also not very good about that.
Me neither.
Of, like core people that I would just talk to every day or whatever.
Yeah.
I always hear like whenever I'm listening to like Joey Diaz or whatever, he's apparently like infamous for doing this. He calls people up like he seems to have like a day of the month, like I call this person in the morning on the 24th of every month, or like every third Sunday. I give this person a call and we go to this place to eat, which is cool. Like this, I don't have time for that. I mean, I guess I do, but
yeah.
Yeah, you definitely do. It's just not a priority.
No, I think that's a related kind of interesting thing about energy levels and kind of having to, choosing when to interact with people. I find that with, like my mom might complain sometimes that my sister takes a while to respond to texts about different things. And I completely kind of sympathize because I know that there's, if you're busy and you're doing things, or even if you're not busy, but like just have like a certain number of things you have to kind of get done, taking time out to do some extra thing that you should be doing but kind of have to catch up, like like getting behind on email or getting behind on different things kind of thing. It's kind of strange because on paper you should be like, oh, I should just be able to whip through all of these different things I have to do because I have the time to do it, instead of just like lying around posting or something. But but it does end up becoming strange where it's like, oh no, that actually does seem like a difficult additional thing to do. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a matter of habit. A lot of things are, but you're kind of reminding me of like generational differences in communication habits, because I think the idea of like checking in on your friends and your loved ones is I'm not going to say that it's a lost art, like that no one does it anymore, but like I remember when I was growing up, my mom would have, kind of like the Joey Diaz thing that you were talking about. She would have maybe like once every couple months, she would like call all of her family, and then I would just hear her speaking in Lithuanian for 5 hours because she was going on the phone with a few relatives in a row. Yeah. And even now it's just kind of funny. There are like okay, so my family, they're all on WhatsApp, which is really nice because I talk with them a lot more than I would otherwise.
Yeah.
But they still have certain older habits of communication. Like my mom, I'll be texting with her, and then she'll be like, "Okay, I've got to go make dinner now. Goodbye." And and I'm like, I keep like telling her, like you don't have to, like that's concluding a conversation is not mandatory in the way that it is when you're on the phone with someone, where it would be insane if you just hung up on them like that. That would be cause for offense. But it's not in texting. Like you just like, it's okay to let it peter out and pick back up if you guys start talking again. And and she just has the old habits. So I would like to make reaching out to people a bigger part of like a normal monthly routine, because it's too easy to fall out of touch with people that you don't even intend to fall out of touch with. Like if they're the ones who are making the effort all the time and then suddenly they stop, like a lot of times I've just lost that, and I don't even realize it until a couple of years later, and I'm like, oh, I used to talk with that person all the time. What happened? Well, maybe that's on me,
Yeah. The thing about the phone that you're talking about, like how it would be insane to just hang up. You ever notice in movies people do that all the time? Like, like they're on the phone with someone and then somebody says something to them and they're just like, "Oh my god, hang up." And that bothers me every single time. I'm like, how did the other person just accept that? Like, why? We need to see a cut back to the other guy being like, "Hello? Hello?" All right.
That's funny.
Yeah, you need realism in your movies.
It just takes me out of it every single time. I don't know.
That's funny.
Yeah, but just to get back to the idea of like making friends or maybe being proactive about that online, I think you guys were talking about how you were sort of slow to get into actually contributing to that kind of the online discourse or whatever we want to call it. I think that I was always pretty quick to just post. Like it felt like, I've talked before about how the internet has always felt like a game to me, and I felt like that's how you play the game. Like you go and you say something and you see what happens, and then you kind of take it from there. So I think a lot of people seem to have a they're like reluctant to do that. Like they feel intimidated, or they feel kind of like, oh well, there's sort of a conversation between these people I don't really know, so I don't want to intrude, or I don't want to get involved necessarily, and all that kind of thing. I think a lot of it isn't necessarily just shyness. I think some of it is sort of like good manners. Like you wouldn't do that in person, so that you have things like that online.
Mm-hmm.
But the internet doesn't really work that way. Like that's not, those kind of manners don't apply exactly. So I think like posting on something awful, and especially in like FIAD, where it was just sort of like constant stream of like just say whatever you think is actually funny. I think that really broke any kind of reluctance that I may have had. That really like broke it out. Like where it's just like I will just post anytime I think of anything that's kind of funny. I know it will get some sort of response, even if it's just really stupid. The fact that it's really stupid will get a response. So someone will say something. It doesn't matter how good of a point or how interesting or funny the thing was originally. Someone else might say something funny, or at least they'll kind of appreciate like, okay, that guy doesn't take this very seriously. That's like I can relate to that or whatever. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think I had something similar to that, where it does feel like a game to me, but the problem is it doesn't feel like it. For a long time, at least, it didn't really feel like there were people behind the people I was talking with a lot of the time. Other than like a small amount of people, like most people, I had no real idea what their lives were like. And over the past few years, it's actually changed a lot, where I have grown an appreciation of how people actually live day to day and stuff. But before that, it was just like a giant mass of accounts that were I was bothering or were annoying me or something. Like it wasn't really, kind of, I don't know. And I think that's, in sort of a related thing, which might have been what the question was also kind of getting at, but I don't know if they actually meant this, but like about relationships and stuff like that, and trying to date people online and try to find people through that kind of thing, like through conversations and stuff, is that I have never had the impulse or like kind of like thought, thinking through like, oh, someone online might be. I joke about it a lot recently, but like, for a long time, like it never connected to me that like one of the accounts online might also be a potential partner or something like that. It was completely like out of any sort of reasonable thing. So I don't have that kind of thought behind it. It just seems like a way of annoying people. Like I was like, I don't want to message people and like try to, people talk about sliding into DMs a lot. I'm just like, that just seems like a whole hassle. I don't want to like, you know what I mean?
I agree. That's I've never done that like seriously. Obviously there are, I think the kind of like romantic or whatever property of these things is much more emergent than it is like foundational.
I think that's true for us. Like we kind of started off just as like friends, and it sort of just organically, I don't know, just from talking about, I don't even really know how we became how it became like an option or
I don't really have a like I think it was a process. It must have been, because I don't have any sort of like moment of realization like, oh, that's when that happened,
I do remember you posted a picture of yourself, and it was kind of like your chest was in the shot. It was just like your shirt. You were like wearing a t-shirt. You were, showing what your shirt was or something like that.
Oh, okay.
And I remember saying like hubba hubba, and I think that may be the first like flirtatious thing I ever said to you. So try that, guys.
Cues.
It works. It works. Yeah. Don't listen to
that. Our first you can win lesson.
Yeah.
Oh man, no. I wasn't. Yeah, the stuff that I have like little impressions of, like my memories, it's all like gross and stupid. I don't remember anything like suave or like, ooh, that's such a romantic thing to say. It was just like, hey, I'm in the bathroom at work or something. Like, it wasn't anything cool. But yeah, what?
I was just gonna say, I mean, my thing has always been, I'm gonna do what I want to do, and people who like that they're gonna stick around, and people who don't, they're gonna go away. So
yeah,
I think that's sort of how our thing developed. Was just
yeah. I mean, I feel similarly, but obviously you can't be like super literal isn't the right term, but you can't be you still have to like some kind of give and take in your conversations with people. Like there has to be some kind of a rapport. You can't just be like, I'm going to post what I want to post and I don't care how anyone receives it, because then you're never going to have like a rapport with anyone. That just sounds like you want to post and have people read your stuff, and that's it. So there's a difference between that style and like one where you can actually banter.
Yeah.
Which, I think that's the important part, as I already said.
Sort of a related thing to that, though, is that as my kind of like follower account has kind of ticked up in the last year, I get a larger number of replies that are just terrible. Like they don't just like, some of them are funny guys that just keep whatever. But I also get a large number of ones that are people that I didn't even really know existed. Like a few years ago, like they're like normies, it seems like, that have a full internet identity. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, it's people that are like, like Bernie Sanders supporters 100% or something like that, or like anarchists or something like that. But they don't, they're not like extremely online. They're just like, it's very, very strange. Because to me, that was like, I don't know, like 3 or 4 years ago, if you knew who Bernie Sanders was, you were pretty, extremely online or something like that kind of thing. But yeah, now there's like this kind of, I don't know, it's like normies that are, I don't know. So anyways, they some of the worst posts, that's all. Like, to me, I don't know. So, but anyways, the point being is that it's hard for me to kind of keep track of who I should, you know what I mean? Like it's just a larger volume of things that I just interact with on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And it's hard for me to then want to initiate conversations as much, because I'm just like, I don't know. It just feels
you
like
can burn out on it too.
Yeah, that's what it. Yeah.
Yeah, if you're trying to really like give everyone their due, like, oh man, they said something to me, I've got to give them at least like 5 minutes of my time. With someone, obviously that would be different for for me, but for someone with a follower count like you have, you would burn out. You wouldn't be able to get to everyone.
Yeah, like I don't know, like there's stuff like courtesy faves, right, where you're supposed to basically anytime a person replies to you and is polite and it's positively received, then you kind of fave it. But like I can't do it for most of the jokes anymore. I just can't bring myself to. There's so many of them that are just like awful, and you're like,
you don't have to. You don't have to.
Yeah,
I don't do that, and I don't get a lot of replies to my stuff.
Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, if it's honestly bad, you don't have to. I don't think it's like, I mean, maybe other people would disagree with me, but I don't think it's rude to just let it go. Like you're not doing it in a passive aggressive way. You're just like, okay, well, I read that and I have no reaction to it that would be positive, so I'm just going to let it, sit there.
Yeah.
I kind of don't feel like anything you do on Twitter is really rude until it's like very obviously like harassment, and you know what I mean, like doxing and like unfollowing mutuals, blocking people, like how, I don't know, it's a website, like who cares, like it's just bathroom reading, like.
But the thing is, though, people really do monitor that stuff really closely, though. That's the thing that I'd be surprised of. There's a lot of people who will notice if someone unfollows them, or you know what I mean, like notice all these different sort of like things, or like notice if, I don't know, like if someone, I don't know. I always notice it. I was always surprised with this about like faving selfies of women and stuff like that. People notice that and make fun of people for that and stuff, and I'm like, I don't know, I never even noticed that as like a thing that people would make fun of me for it. in the last few years.
Well,
I don't know, yeah.
I notice things like unfollows and stuff like that, but I also don't feel like I'm owed anything in the first place. So that makes it like when other people get very upset about that, I don't really find that very identifiable because like if someone unfollows me, I just kind of think like, oh, I guess I'm not their cup of tea. That's
Yeah.
not shocking. I'm
Yeah.
weird. Like,
Anytime I notice unfollows, I'm like, yeah, that's fair.
yeah, exactly. I'm just like, okay, I get it. And you know, if it's someone who you were previously close with, that's kind of a different cup of tea.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yeah. I mean, I do pay attention to those things, but I don't really. I don't think it's as inconsequential as Tom is saying it is to him. Like
Well, the thing
I
is,
notice it, but it's just not like it's not going to cause me heartbreak. You know, I realize that I'm like a little like, what am I to this person? Is it really that meaningful? You know?
right, but you can always just get that follow back. Like, just say something funny that gets retweeted around, and they'll see it, and if they'll probably follow you back. Like that happens all the time.
Yeah, that's
it's
the
not like
weird thing when people like sometimes I'll see people posting stuff about like why don't I have more followers or something like that. Like, well, it's
'cause you suck.
self-evident. Yeah, like the answer is because you're complaining about not having enough followers, you know?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's if I don't know why you like that caring about that number is a different beast that I'm not even going to get into. But yeah, like if it's gonna come, it's gonna come, and if it's not, it's not. So just ride the wave, enjoy it. You know.
I think caring about how many followers you have, some people have like a desire to be, they want to be validated, and that's like a way that they kind of feel validated and stuff.
Of course, yeah.
And that's probably not good. But I mean,
No.
the other thing is like the point of Twitter is that you get to talk to a bunch of people. So the more people that follow you, the more you actually get to use the website, or the more benefit or use you have out of the website. So I don't think it's really, I don't know. Like, I understand everyone wants more followers, right? Like, isn't that kind of the point of the website, to have a bunch of people that you can just like say poo poo pee pee to? And then...
Well, even
you had to use that example, of course. Of course, that's always what I want to say.
I didn't even really mean like as like an individual responding to things happening on their own feed, as much as the fact that people seem very sensitive, or like they try to be very sensitive about things happening like 3 degrees away from them, kind of thing, or something like that. They'll be like, I've really noticed it in the last while, where I kind of was added to a few chats that were not really the people involved in a lot of the things, but kind of like a few degrees removed, that were following pretty closely what was going on in different like beefs online and stuff.
That's so
crazy. They had it all jumbled. Like everything was like a little bit off, or like they kind of had all these kind of like rumors backed into it. They'd be like, oh no, that guy's like a drug addict or something like that. And it had not like it was like a priest or something. It wasn't even like, you know what I mean? Like it was just totally completely wrong. And I'm like, wow. And that really, it's bizarre to me that like that's, I understand if it's like fun or something. Like there's a lot of things that are like just, it's funny to kind of watch people wild out online kind of thing. Like just start losing their marbles and like just posting nuts stuff for days. That's funny. But like if it's just, you know, I don't know, like that journalist said to that journalist, that they didn't think their articles were that great or something. It's like, yeah, whatever. But you know,
that's the kind of stuff that is one roiling mass to me, like that you were talking about. Like anytime people start talking about media or journalism, Twitter, like that's what that is. Those people are a lump to me. I really cannot keep them straight. And I mean, that's obviously because I'm not part of that world anyway, so it doesn't matter if I keep them straight or not.
Yeah.
But really, they don't do anything to distinguish themselves either. So
would you say they're all sort of part of one tribe?
Oh boy, I knew where that was going.
But the thing is, though, is that at some level in like my gut, I'm kind of like, if I did follow this stuff and actually like pitched to editors more and kind of wrote more, I'd probably have like a lot more money from that kind of stuff. It's like, you know what I mean? Like if I actually was like doing my job as I should be doing it, if I'm a part-time writer or something like that, then that would probably make sense to me. But I think being on Twitter actually makes me averse to doing that more because I just kind of see all these things going back and forth, and I'm like, I'm not going to bother doing it right now.
I also still have a very strong sense of my like professional life versus my personal life, which is obviously for tons of people on Twitter. That isn't a distinction. Those are one and the same thing for a lot of people. So yeah, that's just that's like a nightmare to me, to not be able to separate, portions of myself into like their appropriate arenas. That's just a nightmare to me. So, from what you're talking about, like, yeah, if you were more aggressively participating in that sort of thing, that's a different thing for someone like you who is actually like, writing. Like for me, I'm just posting. So it's total like Tom said, like bathroom reading. That's obviously a different tier of interaction, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You know how I've started to think of all this little drama stuff that's happening and people really follow it, and there's sort of like people who just use Twitter to make jokes, or they follow sports, and they maybe even kind of shallow political engagement, like they just sort of read big takes that get retweeted around and maybe make their own little comments and stuff. But then there's people who really get into the drama between different accounts, and now it's like podcasts and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I've started to think of those as like soap operas. Like it's how like old ladies, they have their stories that they always have to go and watch their stories. And it's the same thing. Like we're turning into like grannies who got to watch their stories,
Yeah.
And when you were describing the people who had the details all mixed up, I was just kind of thinking about that they're making it up for themselves. Like it's all very, like you are to some degree involved in the creation of your own soap opera, that you get to see people argue back and forth, but what the meaning of that argument is, you kind of make that narrative up for yourself. So.
Well, maybe that's the appeal to people, because that's a common narcissist fantasy too, right? To be like the protagonist in your own tale or whatever.
Right.
So if everyone thinks of themselves like that, it's like about like dueling narratives. Just like whose narrative is going to win? Who's going to pay attention to this? And that's so sick. It really bugs me.
Well, I mean, it would explain the political inflection that a lot of this stuff takes, because then you can sort of imagine that this argument between two morons on the internet is actually like representative of these giant world historical forces, kind of playing themselves
but you
out.
can see how completely fabricated all of it is.
You can, but if you don't want to see that, then you won't.
Sure, definitely. But when it's so clearly manufactured, doesn't that? I mean, I'm going to ask this rhetorically, and I know my answer is not the same as other people's answers. But doesn't that take the appeal away of it? Like it's not real. It's just manufactured beefs. I don't see the appeal of that. I really don't like to pay attention to this stuff at all anymore. I don't know. I know it holds an appeal for people, but just not for me. I don't know.
I just always think it's funny how it has to be tied now by a chain of causation to someone dying. Like it's always, that's every argument now. No, every argument online is always, there's always like, if you like say, if you fave this person who knows this person who said this slur, and then someone might hear that slur and then might be empowered as a white nationalist to go then, attack this guy to, die. You know what I mean? Like there's always that kind of mental causation in there that like people are like, you can't, tolerate these ironic jokes because
is that because they need
like,
to
that's why I make
ramp
the jokes.
it up?
But that's the idea, right? Is that there's some sort of like chaos effect, chain of causation that comes from, because that's the reason why you're not allowed to do ironic jokes now, is because there's some sort of way that it all kind of shakes out to actual politics getting bad or something like that kind of thing. So I don't know. It's just amazing that like that's why that's why they kind of create these kind of stories that spin out into extremes, is because if it were just like two podcasts fighting or something like that, then no one would care at all. Like they need to kind of anchor it into some sort of like trauma outside of online or something. So, yeah.
I guess so. I just, yeah, maybe if they were more convincing in like what the link is, maybe I would care more.
Yeah.
But they're not.
I tend to think that just has to do with like black and white thinking and the fact that nuance doesn't really work in this kind of medium. So you sort of have to make things like right, wrong, good guys, bad guys. I'm on the good guys. They're the bad guys. They're bad because of this. They're
you know what?
Whatever,
I will
Nazi
say,
or whatever.
To try to bring this to the friendship aspect of the topic, I will say that one thing that's nice about something as enormous as Twitter is you can find a group. Like you'll find a group that works for you. Like when you're saying like the medium doesn't lend itself to this, I don't agree with that. I think that there are certain communities where that's just not the timbre of the, that's not like the tone of the conversation. Like you're saying like takes and like black and white, right and wrong, like that kind of thing. That's not like how Twitter is as a platform. So I mean, obviously a lot of people use it that way, but I think that you can find, if you just kind of keep poking around and just clicking around, you'll find a group of people who have like a style of, like of rapport that more lends itself to what you're going for.
I don't disagree with that, but I do think that the design and even the way that we use the internet and social media now it does lend itself. There is a tendency to blot out nuance and to push things into black and white.
You think that that's like kind of built into the platform itself?
Yeah, you don't have enough context. It's like there's all these decontextualized messages flying around. Everyone's trying to get attention. Like the basic economy is all around attention. So nuance that requires like contextual understanding and stuff doesn't work as well as just blaring something that doesn't even have to make sense. It just has to be really obvious. Like you read it, you know what it means, and you have some understanding that it's an important thing. That's all that it really takes.
Yeah, you probably are right. I just have gravitated so far away from using it in that way that it sounds foreign to me now. So I'm
congratulations.
Hey, fuck you! I'm not trying to say I'm better than anyone.
You found the Zen Twitter space.
It's cool to be locked. It's good. It's fun. It's nice. It's nice to be a tiny locked account. I'm totally being sincere. I really like it.
I think Tom and I talked about this earlier another time when we were talking about found our kind of friend group online, and it tended to be kind of in that way that by being at the periphery of a big forum or something like that was kind of populated by terrible takes, and then at the kind of edge of that were people making fun of the kind of center of the platform, and that kind of migration over time of those people through kind of a series of off forums, kind of continuing that process of kind of not weeding out, because it's not like the people at the margins had all the best takes either. It was just kind of like but there was that kind of process of and I think Twitter is it operates in a lot of the same way, where the people that I kind of follow and I find funny tend to be kind of just joking about things that are like they're still watching what's happening on the rest of Twitter kind of thing, but they're kind of just picking out the funniest things, or kind of picking out the ones that they think are crazy or something like that.
Yeah,
and that's kind of always been like I've always had a hard time. I always think of it in terms of like movies too, or something like that, where I mostly watch like the popular movies and then kind of make fun of them more than I would say watch actually good movies and then criticize them in an intelligent way. Do you know what I mean? It's kind of like it's almost like a sugar high kind of thing where it's like, you're kind of just watching. I don't know, like ever so often I kind of swear to myself I'm going to stop reading bad takes and just kind of focus on like intelligent people saying intelligent things. But it's so tempting just to kind of laugh at people just kind of saying the dumbest things they can think of. So
yeah, I mean, I know what you're saying, but there's kind of, along the lines of what you were talking about in like the process of like the periphery kind of becoming the center. I don't know if that's where you were going with it, but I mean, it gets a little incoherent after a while, because when those narratives of like people sitting there and like taking pot shots from the side become the main narrative, then it starts eating itself. And I kind of feel like that's where we are now.
Sure.
I would
and
agree with that.
that's not. And then you get a bunch of hangers on who are sitting there going about jokes that they didn't like. They're just regurgitating them.
Yeah.
That's very weird, and that's
weird,
hard.
yeah.
That's hard to interact with.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just how it goes,
Yeah.
The cycle of posting.
That's true. It's gonna, something else will become the periphery, and then, it just kind of keeps going like that.
I'm sitting on a stock of slurs here. I can't wait for that to come back into style. I'm gonna make it big on the next platform that's owned by, whatever. Yeah.
Cool. So do you want to maybe transition to just take a few questions and then?
Seems about that time. Yeah. Actually, I kind of had a question for you guys that was related to the topic. I wanted to know what the first time you ever met someone in real life off, like like an internet friend that you met in person. And if you guys want to talk about that and like how that went, I could start. I think I first met someone. It was in Finland. And I was there, like, I think it was summer, because I don't remember there being a lot of snow. And I was like 15 or 16, and this was someone from the Mr. Bungle forums. Okay. And it was another like 15, 16-year-old kid. And we just kind of walked around and then went to a record store, and I bought a Alla Maailman Vasarat CD. Which
yeah.
You know that band?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, they're a Finnish band, but anyway, if someone knows them, that's cool. Like, they're good. I'll put their music on the back of this episode. And that was interesting.
That's really cute.
Yeah, it was fun. I think I ended up meeting him somewhere another time somehow. Like, I think he actually visited Italy or something.
Oh, that's the age when this happened? You were in Italy at the time?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was like 15 or 16.
I don't think that is really cute. I also know other people who, like, one of my friends was, when we were in high school, was super, super active on on the Weezer forums. And she met lots of people because they would go to shows, so that's a very it just lends itself very easily to meeting in person. And then another friend is still in touch with someone who they met on DBZ forums when they were like 11 or something like that. They're still in touch. I think that's really cute and sweet. I don't remember. I remember my first failed romance online. And it's kind of what made me really like, well, okay, so this was when I think I was a freshman in college. Yeah, I must have been a freshman. And I had met someone who a group of my friends were friends with. Like, he didn't go to our school, but he was like friends with them from back home. And I met him one time when he was visiting, and he's very bright, weird guy. So, everyone at that time exchanged, your AIM screen name. So we talked on AIM probably like for a few hours a night for at least half a year. Maybe something more like, I don't know, 8 months or something like that. And, it got very intense, and I was like, man, I can't really tell, like, I feel something stronger than like friendship for him. Like, we're exchanging like music all the time and stuff that we're writing. And I was just like, wow, this is, is that what this is? Like, I didn't really know. I didn't have any like real life comparison to compare and contrast that with. So, at the end of the school year, I was going to go back home, and that's where that group of friends was. He lived where I was from. So I just remember meeting up to go to the beach in Evanston, and we met up, and there was no chemistry at all. It was just, I think both of us were kind of looking at each other like, yep.
Yeah.
All right. And I mean, things have changed since then, because it's no longer as text based. Like, we weren't on the phone every night. We were just on AIM, and emailing stuff back and forth to one another. So now I think the fact that people do a lot more like video chatting, it gives you kind of a better idea of what that person is going to be like in person.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just such a weird contrast, because there was just no chemistry at all in person. And I had been so intense, the relationship between us had been so intense online. So from that point on, I was very like, when people would be like, I'm in love, like I have an e-girlfriend, I'd be like, yeah, do you? No. Because I just didn't, like, I'd be like, yeah, okay, whatever, just meet in person and see if it still works.
Yeah.
And so I was very, very dubious of that kind of thing. So even now, I mean, I still would say, like, wait until you meet to declare your love or get engaged or whatever people do in a rush. But yeah, so that was, I don't remember the first time I met someone just like my buddy online, but that was the first romance. I think because I was on, like, when I was in school, that kind of happened like semi-frequently, since I went to such a big school where, like, I remember low-tax came to talk at my school.
Yeah.
And I went to go to that talk, and like there was a goon who like hosted, like, it was a goon who got him there in the first place, and then it was a different goon who hosted the after party and stuff like that. So it was pretty permeable, the distance between online and in person was not like, it's not like you were states away, you're all in the same small town,
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was a little bit different.
So I guess for me, I didn't really meet that many people offline. I mean, like in the last few years, I guess I have. But so in 2007, when I was living in Montreal, some guy was visiting Montreal who I'd talked to a bit online, who was just into like philosophy stuff and kind of analytic, kind of just standard kind of Anglo-American philosophy and stuff. So we met and talked for about, I don't know, not that long, maybe like 20, 30 minutes or something like that. I had a nice conversation. So I kind of thought to myself, oh, okay, well, there is a goon meet tonight in Montreal, so I'll go there and go, talk to the people there, and maybe that'll go well too, kind of thing. And I went there, and now this is, I'm not that cool, but but like, I was there, and I was like, oh man, this is not right. These people are, there's something wrong. Like, this guy showed up. This guy showed up with he was carrying in one hand a Doctor Who DVD, walking around with it, like around the city with it, kind of thing, and then in his other hand was a wooden staff, like a full wooden staff, like walking stick kind
to
of
beat
thing.
back all the girls that are
Anyways, he started
Donald, you did say that you consider yourself like GBS, and this sounds like a GBS tier Coon Meat.
No, I'm Forum ID1. I am. I know where my home is, and so I mean these are my people, but I just I don't know. It was very. I was like, I don't know, and some of them seem pretty nice. Like I can't, like, you know what I mean. Like it's not like whatever, but I ended up talking most of the time about guns to a reservist guy. I was like, so they let you like use the real rifles, right? Just stuff like that. You know? So I don't know, but so that was my first. I don't know.
That's funny.
All right, well, thanks for sharing those, guys. Yeah, I just thought that would be a good way to do it. All right, so someone has a question here. Do you guys think the accumulation of wealth is immoral?
Yes.
Yeah, I also think it's immoral. It's actually something that is, from what I've heard, it's supposed to be technically impossible under like proper Sharia regulations and stuff, that any wealth that you have sitting around at the end of the year is just confiscated. And so that like it's supposed to just kind of be constantly flowing and things and stuff like that. So yeah, I think just hoarding up wealth is bad.
Yeah, I think it's true that like I also feel like for most people that it's just too easy of a question to have to answer, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Like, because it's kind of like, well, you know, it's more kind of like, what are you doing in your own life to address issues around you, and what capacity do you have? And for most people, really, it's just trying to kind of get by is enough of enough work. You know what I mean?
Definitely
like,
not hoarding wealth. I mean,
yeah.
So,
like I'm hemorrhaging wealth, baby. Yeah. I'm okay there. You know.
And it's funny too, because even at the high end, you know, at the high end of the high kind of like, you know, bourgeois kind of like, you know, capitalist class, whatever. They have the same kind of ideology of, oh no, you got to give most of it away. You've got to. Most of them do. Most of them have that kind of idea of, you know, that you kind of have to cycle through things and kind of give to causes and stuff. But it's just that, and people kind of like try to kind of, it's sort of like a half-assed critique of it, being like, no, it's actually like a tax dodge. They actually are getting rich off of it or something. I don't even think that's true. I think that they really are giving away a lot of money. It's just that
I think both are true there.
Yeah, I think it's both.
But I think, well, it's more that the way that they're giving away the money is inconsistent with justice anyways, a lot of the time. Like they're giving it to like charter schools, or they're giving it, do you know what I mean? Like it's just kind of, and I think
Israeli
that also,
militias and stuff.
Yeah. And I think that, that kind of thing really, it's more kind of, there's, you know, and then they just keep a lot of it for themselves anyways, what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like, it's like what they're, you know, they have a lot of money anyways. It's almost like they're giving away excess wealth. It's not like they're giving away wealth that they could use to make their lives better in any real way. You know what I mean? Like they've already kind of maxed out consumption as much as is reasonable for them anyways. It's not like they're kind of, you know what I mean? Like the extra millions on top of what they already have is not going to add that much extra to their lives. So it's kind of like, is that really a moral consideration even for them? It's just more kind of like it's another way to kind of rub it in.
You wouldn't consider that even, like the fact that they have reached a ceiling of how much they can spend on themselves. That, I mean, to me, that sounds like you're already sitting on excess wealth. Like you don't need to get to that point to be a villain.
That's
you know?
That's true. That's true. That's what I mean. Like it's like that. I mean that they are not.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like it's kind of like, I don't know. Like there's a lot of like upper middle class people who are like, it's kind of people that have a little bit extra and are making choices about tending towards things. That's where most of like the actual people that have kind of a room to move or something like that, room to actually make differences in their decisions that would affect people around them and stuff like that. Those are the people who are, say, screwing their workers, but then giving to charity a bit or something like that. You know, like there's, do you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of people that kind of are in a gray zone, and that's where most moral decisions are probably being made. That, you know what I mean? Like, then it is actually black and white kind of stuff. So yeah.
Tom, I was curious. Do you happen to know who decides it, like in this is kind of ideal system of like say there was a caliphate and wealth was being like excess wealth was being confiscated from the super wealthy. Who decides on how it's spent and who it goes to?
I suppose that the state would, the caliph would probably have some sort of. I mean, it really
Historically,
depends.
how has that worked? Who decides where it goes? Do you know?
I don't know. I don't really know enough to speak about that in detail. I know that it is. You have to look at it based on, like, it depends, like what you're looking at exactly. There's not like a single
I figured.
template.
Yeah.
But the essential idea is that there is an authority, and whether that's a state authority or some sort of pseudo-state religious authority or something like that, it's given some form of official kind of
sanction,
and that they would handle that. I would imagine that it's the same people who take the zakat tax, and that is that needs to be taken as a tax. Like nowadays, people do it voluntarily, and it's taken on this like charity kind of form. But historically, it's actually been more of a tax.
Right. Okay. Just curious. Thanks.
Sure. Okay. Someone asks, "Is there hope for us slackers and fail sons?"
Depends on what kind of hope. In this world, no. Just kidding.
Next one also no. Yeah, I mean, okay, so slackers and fail sons, I guess we're talking about the, our audience. and us. And by hope, I suppose, I don't know what we're really talking about. Yeah, that's really the question. Like, I think people are a lot worse off than any of us are. Anyone listening to this, there are people in a lot worse situations than you. So, that's not to belittle or to kind of make you feel like your problems aren't real or whatever. But if you're seriously asking, like, is there any hope for me? Like, yeah, there is. Like, you have to actually something about that.
Well, I think part of it is you don't have a likelihood that you'll achieve in the same way as someone that has the full career, going all, on all cylinders and kind of trying to climb the, political or whatever ladder. But if, so you can't succeed in their terms. If that's not your goal, then you kind of have to accept that you're not going to have that same type of success. Like you're going to have your own kind of, you're going to really have to, and there's a huge social pressures and family pressures and all that kind of stuff to try to tell you that that's not what you should be doing, but that's not necessarily, so it might be harder to achieve in that kind of way, like to do things that you want to do yourself. But that, that's just life. That's just the way it is. Like, I don't know. I find that a lot with when people are talking about different types of social pressures on, like, feeling like you should have to have kids or feeling like you have to do this or that or something like that. I'm always like, yeah, well, those pressures are not necessarily coercion. It's just like, it's just the way things are arranged now, and you kind of have to go with it, or, you kind of have to avoid it in your own way and accept that there might be some consequences for you in terms of missing out on some things.
The shits and the Johnson.
Yeah.
Right. So, I sort of think of it like you're not going to get another chance. It doesn't matter if it's fair or not. Like, this is your life. This is what you got.
Yeah.
And, you just got to do what you can to make it worth, I don't know, just to do something with it. Like, if you're not going to succeed at goals that you don't even really believe in, well, come up with other goals and go after those. And even if that just means, like, I just want to do the least amount of work every day and avoid the problems that people have, fine, do it. Like, that's whatever. But I just don't have a lot of patience for, like, mopey type of stuff. And I don't think the person asking this question is that. I think it was kind of sent in good humor and everything. But I basically think, like, just do your thing and don't worry about all that stuff. Like, wait until it becomes an actual obstacle and a problem before you start to get all complaining about it, you know?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, there's a kind of tendency to adapt a sort of fatalism that you may not even realize that you don't actually feel it. It's just so commonplace to talk about people in your situation with that attitude that you just kind of end
Yeah.
up going with the flow, which is a normal thing to do. I'm not trying to criticize that. But if it's starting to actually make you feel bad and less like of a worthwhile person, then it becomes a problem. And then you have to kind of shake things up and just as you guys said, you know, you just have to find your own priorities, and it's okay if you're not reaching your goal. I think like having certain goals is better than reaching the goals. And you know, like, you don't have to have achieved perfection to be worthwhile, obviously. And it's more about just like, you know, finding what you would like to excel in or just be like decent at. Like, stuff for me, like, I really wanted to, I felt bad because I don't really have that much of a real life community. Like, I'm not like around like a congregation, for example, like how some people, you know, like church is like their second family or something like that. I don't
Yeah.
really have anything like that. So I was like, well, food security means a lot to me. So I want to start volunteering with that kind of cause. And I did. And I started going
Mhm.
from there.
That's
Like
cool.
that kind of stuff, you know, like you don't
Yeah.
have to, like, I'm not, you know, yeah, you don't have to agree with what other people think your priorities should be. Make it work for yourself and find something like that's rewarding for your soul. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's generally what I have tried to do.
Yep.
All right, next one is for me, currently drinking is a big part of life in that most of my friends drink, and in order to be around them, a lot of times I feel like I have to drink. Any advice?
Mm. Well, have you tried not drinking while you're around them? I'm not trying to be glib, but really, I mean, when I don't think most normal people are going to be like, drink, drink, drink. If you're like, no, I'm not going to have a drink
Depends
today.
the age.
Yeah, it's
That's
the
true.
age, I
That's
think. Yeah.
true. That's true. And I mean, like, I know people who are still doing that, even if they're in their 30s, because they're like, you know, like finance bros or something like that. So yeah, it does still happen, but I think, I mean, it depends on who the person is, what the situation this person who's asking it is in. But give it a try. That would be my first thing. Like, don't just assume like, oh, well, I can't do that. What am I going to do about this? Like, just give it a try. And I'm sorry if you already have. Circle back with a question again next time. I'll do my best to answer. But yeah, give it a try. See how it goes. See if maybe you don't like being sober around drunk people, or maybe it's okay. But yeah, just give it a try in a few different contexts first and go from there.
What I tend to do is, like, if people are doing something I don't like, I just say that it's gay, and then they start to not want to do it anymore, and you know.
Yeah.
So I would recommend that.
Yeah, I would say that part of it is just, you know, what do you want out of that situation or interaction anyways? Like, if you're going there to have fun and you're not having fun because you don't, you know, you're struggling over whether or not you should be drinking or not or something like that, you might just have to figure out something else to do, or to do that
Yeah.
less, or, you know, it's not necessarily like there's so much you can do in a day now, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Like, so much options that you have that you might just need to find different people to hang out with sometimes, or something like that, you know? So
Yeah, or invite these friends of yours. Maybe they're like you really like them. They're your real friends. And it just happens to be that you guys have this like habit of, oh, we always go to this bar and that's what we do. Well, why don't you suggest that you do something different? And, you don't have to drink. And if they say like, oh, should we bring some beers? Just be like, yeah, let's not worry about that. Or, do whatever you want. I'm not going to bring anything, or I'm not going to drink. Just kind of arrange it so that it doesn't have to be centered around that. Because I think I'm thinking back to when I was like early 20s, and that was sort of a big part of life. That's often what it was. It was like the way to socialize was to get some beers or get some weed or whatever, and that was that was like an excuse to socialize. But you don't have to make it so that you just awkwardly socialize around nothing. You can just find something that isn't like consuming drugs, you know?
Yeah, a lot of my friends from college were ex-straight edge. Not like super into that as like an identity, but they just had never, not an interest for them. So we were always just doing really dumb, weird stuff to entertain ourselves that didn't involve that. I think a lot of them thought of, and I can't blame them for having this impression, a lot of people just drink because they're bored and they can't think of anything else to do. And that's like the worst reason to drink. Like a drink should be like a fun special occasion, like this is a celebration or something. It shouldn't be something that you're doing like 5 times a week or something, So yeah, the only reason I'm mentioning that is because there are, like Donald said, there are so many things that you could be doing other than drinking. Don't give up on yourself when you're trying to think of like what there is to do. There's tons, and a lot of it's free too. Like you just have to be creative.
Yeah, and you may feel like, well, everything is boring if you're not high or drunk or whatever. Like just do it, all right? You're not going to be able to keep this up. Like, just figure it out. If you don't figure it out now, like, keep this up, you're going to be old and then get bored of all the stuff you're doing and then not know how to have fun outside of that, and it's going to suck. So figure it out, and once you realize, like, oh, I can have just actual real fun, like, that isn't just chemically induced, then all that chemical bullshit that you're doing, you can add that into the mix, and then it's like
it's double fun.
Fun. So as much as I'm not trying to promote any of that, I'm just saying that that's how that works. Okay, Donald, this is a question directly for you, and we did sort of do a whole episode on this, but maybe I don't know, you can answer this or you can just say, like, refer to that episode. But the question is, what is Donald's current relationship to Marxism?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of, in a long-term kind of, like, if you look at it from like a macro history perspective, like, I still think it's basically true that factories and these kind of, new types of technology and stuff are pushing things towards more and more collective production and more collective planning of things. I think that's just obvious to me. It just seems like, and I think that undermines private property in a lot of ways, and it creates the need for like democratic institutions that can kind of manage that kind of thing. And if that's true, then so many other things kind of play into that. The main difference, I think, for me now is that, number one, I don't really care as much about the identities that are kind of plugged into that. Like, I don't really care about proletarian culture or that kind of stuff, like this idea of attributing political beliefs to people because of their position in it as much. I don't think that's really panned out as well as people thought it would. And then the other thing I don't really care as much about, which is, it might seem kind of paradoxical, but if it doesn't happen in my lifetime, I don't really care. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I feel like that's like the macro history kind of perspective, and it'd be nice if like social problems were less and people could kind of, poverty was less, or all these other things. Like, I do want that, like, as insofar as an individual citizen, I can kind of push in my little way towards that kind of stuff. I'll kind of keep doing that, but I don't have the kind of drive to smash things that disagree with that or take a leading role in the struggle for that kind of thing. At the same time, like, I could see like writing a book, like I want to write a book about kind of like certain related to stuff and kind of like make fun of some of the different ways of thinking that come around this. So it's not like I'm not like opposed to it. It's just that I don't know. And I think the main thing really is just the religious side of it too, which is that I feel like a huge pressure now that I never did before to kind of make it cohere with what average people think around me, kind of thing. I don't feel like I have an impulse to like impose things on people as I kind of did in some ways. And I feel like if it weren't like, say, jiving with church teaching or something like that, like I feel like there's a huge amount of stuff I have to read or learn, or maybe not even learn, but just kind of accept that it's out there or something like that is critical of those kind of macro historical kind of things, because they can be wrong, they can turn out wrong. And if that's true, it wouldn't it wouldn't shatter my worldview is the main thing at this point. Like it wouldn't, you know what I mean? It wouldn't like if they said, well, that's one tendency that is there, but there's no necessary reason why it's going to, you know, come out in that kind of direction or something like that. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine. It's not like I don't feel the drive that I used to about that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Let's do another one here. I saw someone say that feeling guilt for something you did is okay, but that you should avoid shame, except in the case of major wrongs that you've committed. What do you guys think of this? So, feeling guilt for something you did is okay, but you should avoid shame except in the case of major wrongs.
Shaming yourself?
Yeah,
or
I'm a little
opening
bit
up.
confused.
Are they asking that, like, opening up your whatever you did wrong to others so that they can shame you?
I think I've heard something similar before, and it's kind of like a psychology kind of thing. Like, I mean, like a pop kind of psychology kind of thing. And I think what it is that guilt is responsibility for something. Like saying that, like, say, I hurt that person and I should have, or something like that. And then shame is sort of like negative self-talk and negative talk about guilt or something like that. So it's people are saying that, like, in most cases, you should try to accept guilt where you're responsible, but avoid turning it into like kind of a complex where you just kind of keep feeling terrible about it all the time. And it's better to just kind of address it in some way, like actually resolve the problem or fix what you kind of, I don't know. It's sort of like the AA kind of stuff where they go, you shouldn't just kind of feel bad about, say, beating someone up while you're drunk or something. You should go talk to them about it. Stuff like that. I think that might be what they're getting at. And they're saying that shame is kind of reserved for stuff that you can't really make amends for or something.
This just reeks of Western chauvinism to me.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess my kind of take on it, that kind of stuff, is that it's one of those things I think that only makes sense to someone if they're kind of really deep in that kind of thinking. You know what I mean? Like, to the average person, it probably doesn't make much sense. But there are people that kind of get trapped in shame, especially for like abuse and things like that. Like, they get really kind of where they kind of think of themselves as being somehow bringing abuse on themselves and all that kind of stuff. And I can really understand why that person would have to kind of go through that kind of thinking to kind of work through dividing the guilt from the shame and all that kind of stuff. Like, I can kind of get that, but I don't know. I feel like it's anything like that, like for mental health kind of stuff, is that a lot of times it just sounds irrelevant unless it really is your case, kind of thing. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and a lot of times it's sort of like something that is basically manageable or almost like a natural thing that people do, and it's saying like, don't do that, instead do this other thing, and it's like, why? This is fine. Like, for me, I have really negative self-talk isn't even how I think about it, but like, if I want to do something, like if I want to motivate myself to do something, I will kind of tell myself, like, get up off your lazy ass, you fucking idiot. Go do it. Stop sitting around. Like, I kind of talk to myself that way, and that doesn't make me feel bad. It's just like that motivates me. I don't know. It's. I think people are just different. Like, you can't make blanket statements, basically.
I think in the context that or of this question and what Donald was saying, I think maybe it's where it turns toxic. Like, you're not talking about that in a toxic way. Like, that sounds like it might be, if you put those words into categories, maybe it would be like, oh, that's a mean word. But you're not using it in a cruel way or an unproductive way where you're just beating yourself up. So I think that might have more to do with it. Like someone might be asking, like, how do I get out of these cycles of thought where it's not productive and I'm just hurting myself?
Exactly.
Distinction makes sense.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think it has a lot to do with how you're raised, because the voice that comes into my head, it's a lot like how my dad will talk about stuff.
Okay.
That makes it sound like my dad was so abusive or whatever, but he was just like very kind of firm, like, here's the standard, meet the standard, and then you're good and we're good. And then that felt really good to meet the standard. So, that's what motivates me. I don't know. And I imagine that there are people that are even more extreme than that. You know what I mean? So you don't want to tell people that what they're doing that's actually working is unhealthy when it may not be, So yeah, should we do some more? Maybe.
Did we answer that one?
Did we answer that one? What do we? Yeah, I guess so. What do we think about this? We think it's
okay. Sorry. I just couldn't remember the actual question. I'm sorry.
You know what? Let's do two. There's one here about books, and then there's one that I think would be a good way to finish it off. So the next one here is, what are some books on the decline and transition to capitalism of the Soviet Union that aren't too hard to read?
Oh, I'll field this one.
Oh, yeah?
Sorry, go ahead.
You have any recommendations for that, Donald? I can't think of anything in particular.
So there's a book called, it depends on, what your definition of too hard to read, but there's like two books, which I can't recommend enough, that they're collections by economist at the University of Amsterdam, I think he is. His name's Michael Ellman, and they're called things like The Destruction of the Soviet Union and I think the other one might be called Decline or something like that. There's two books, and what they are collections of sort of like short, I'm not even sure what to call them, maybe like kind of like they're just chapters, but by different people that were involved in the planning in different ways. And not all of them are economists, or there's people like, I think George Soros is actually one of them. You know what I mean? It's people that are just kind of like commentators, or like people that were involved in different things in different ways, and that were like really quite directly involved. And what they kind of say about different things is fascinating, because number one, it's not all the same thing. Like, they all have different views on things and different kind of takes. So Michael Ellman writes also a few different, so they're books that are aimed at like mainstream economists. They're aimed sort of at like the left edge of economics, but they're by liberals. Like, they're not like socialist books. They're critical of planning. But they do, like, the difference for Michael Ellman from the kind of like mainstream of the economics profession is that he thinks that planning was a stable system that was different from capitalism and kind of its own thing, that just produced less than capitalism. Like, it wasn't as efficient as capitalism, which is different from kind of like the libertarian view, which became kind of like the mainstream view, the kind of common sense view. The common sense kind of view is that planning doesn't work at all, like just even like the libertarian view is that it's impossible, and it just kind of creates all these absurdities, and that the whole economy would collapse and
that's
stuff.
That's such a silly idea.
It's like an insane project. Yeah, and so I think the much more kind of like intelligent liberal version of it is just kind of saying that it was, from the perspective of like a liberal economist, it had all these dysfunctions, but it was its own stable system that could have continued on and could have reformed and stuff. So there's a lot of things in it that are interesting, because the main kind of focus of it is, because he has that idea, the focus of most of the articles are people saying that why the planners didn't even think to do certain things because of like the ideology that from an economics perspective would have been obvious things to do. And then other things that they did that were pretty obvious that they did try to do, but because they tried to do like 100 things at once in the 80s, they were so, you couldn't tell what was good or not. You couldn't tell what worked, what wasn't working, what was causing problems in other parts of the economy for the different reforms and stuff. Like, it was like a shock kind of thing that screwed up everything at once. And then you couldn't really just test. There wasn't like a sort of objective thing that they could just kind of test things. And like, I think a good example is that a lot of the Soviet economy was kind of like, well, parts of it at least were kind of underground, like secret military kind of operations. Like the military was so big that so much of the production was in these kind of military factories in towns that weren't even on the official maps and all that kind of stuff. Very, very kind of strange things like that. And those military factories were more efficient than civilian factories. And so there was this idea to take inspectors from the military plants and put them in like civilian plants and kind of bring them up to military standards. And if they did that, that would actually cause a significant, that was the idea. But when you do that, it creates so many different problems. Like, like the factory managers don't like these people coming in to inspect and all that, like these, like basically foreigners to them, like, from other system coming in and forcing them to kind of, change their production. And they have these ideas of like, we'll reduce military spending and then put it into civilian stuff, and all that kind of stuff worked, but there were so many different things piled on top of each other that it really didn't. I don't know. So I don't know. I find that kind of stuff fascinating. That is very interesting. How it actually, so
like I'm kind of over the whole Soviet, all these debates about socialism. Like I was interested in them for a bit, but I'm kind of over it now. But that sounds like a really interesting read. I might look into that.
Yeah, I mean, I read that maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, but those were the kind of ones that made me interested in that kind of stuff.
Okay, so last question here. I'm going to answer it. I'm going to read it. I'm going to answer it because can you explain how your pod embodies Islamo-Christian values and how these values provide the basis for not only our civilization's material prosperity, but also its moral authority? Thank you. No, I can't. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. The Twitter is @YouCan'tWinPod. Please continue to send in questions. We're burning through these things real fast, so please feed us your questions, and we'll catch you on the next one.